Right now, the vast and diverse Asia-Pacific region currently stands as the single most climate-vulnerable territory on Earth. The physical realities are immediate. Communities face unpredictable rainfall and severe flooding that consistently disables critical infrastructure and halts local commerce. Conversely, prolonged droughts in countries like Cambodia are actively threatening the agrarian livelihoods that form the backbone of their domestic economies. These ecological extremes force a necessary pivot in how we evaluate regional stability. We are no longer simply assessing environmental damage. We have to look at hard economic data. This regional data projection visualizes the precise macroeconomic threat. If these climate impacts remain unaddressed, regional GDP is forecasted to plummet by up to 9% by the year 2050. For developing nations, a 9% economic contraction represents total systemic failure, eroding decades of developmental progress and human security. Climate vulnerability in the Asia-Pacific is therefore the single greatest imminent macroeconomic threat to regional stability. Neutralizing this threat requires an immense mobilization of capital. Specifically, an estimated $36 billion in investment is needed between 2023 and 2050 just to meet carbon neutrality goals. That figure appears daunting locally, but it contrasts sharply with the reality of international finance. Global capital markets currently hold trillions in liquidity, actively seeking sustainable green investments. This creates a central paradox. The global capital exists, the severe local need exists, yet the money is stalling. This structural bottleneck persists due to the absence of institutional pathways capable of deploying that global capital safely down to the ground level. Surviving the climate crisis requires moving beyond the pursuit of raw liquidity and focusing on the specific institutional architecture needed to bridge this gap. This snaps the failure point, the financing gap separating climate funds from ground-level needs. Traditional banks retreat here. Unable to calculate risk for small enterprises, they withdraw. The root cause is weak capacity, lacking climate risk tools and ESG frameworks to meet international standards. This creates a cascading failure. Without these assessment tools and governance structures, local ecological needs cannot be translated into the standardized, bankable projects that global investors require. Without localized data and rigorous governance, global climate capital is functionally blind. It cannot deploy because it cannot calculate what it is buying. The required systemic fix is the intervention of development finance institutions, or DFIs. DFIs do not operate like standard commercial lenders seeking immediate maximized returns. They act as market makers and catalysts. Looking at this operational diagram, DFIs deliberately absorb the perceived risks that paralyze commercial banks. They achieve this through innovative instruments like blended finance, mixing public funds with private capital. The result is accessible green lending programs designed specifically for MSMEs and rural communities. In highly vulnerable areas like Cambodia, regional networks like ADFIAP step in to provide the foundational support and knowledge transfer these DFIs need to operate effectively. DFIs act as the structural bridge for climate finance, translating unquantifiable ecological risk into structured, manageable financial products. To scale this de-risking process across the entire Asia-Pacific, financial institutions require a formalized, standardized operating platform. This schematic outlines the ADFIAP Nexus Plus Facility, designed as the architectural solution to this exact problem. Nexus Plus breaks down the barriers systematically. Pillar 1 tackles the issue of weak project pipelines. It provides direct technical assistance, helping local members refine their raw, ground-level ideas into highly rigorous, climate-aligned projects that banks can actually underwrite. Pillar 2 addresses the barrier of high perceived risk by focusing on institutional strengthening. This step literally builds the missing internal systems for local banks. It installs the rigorous ESG parameters, climate risk models, and sustainability frameworks that international markets demand. Finally, Pillar 3 performs the matchmaking. It connects these newly formalized, low-risk local portfolios directly to global investors and climate funds. Nexus Plus acts as an institutional operating system. It standardizes local data so that global capital can finally flow downward without friction. When we transition from abstract financial architecture to real-world execution, the impact of these funds is highly tangible. These use cases illustrate how funds deploy. The first application is green MSME financing, targeting local businesses. Nexus Plus helps microfinance institutions design green loan products, allowing small businesses to afford the transition to cleaner technologies and solar power. The second major application targets direct ecological vulnerabilities through nature-based solutions. Projects like mangrove restoration and watershed protection are critical for coastal defense, but they are traditionally ignored by commercial banks because they lack an immediate, extractable financial yield. Nexus Plus structuring transforms these public goods into viable, bankable coastal resilience projects that protect local GDP from future storm damage. The precise financial engineering completed inside an office is what directly dictates the physical survival and resilience of a landscape. This comprehensive map illustrates the repaired financial architecture operating at scale. We trace the ideal flow of capital, beginning on the left, with a unified community of development financiers, local banks, and governments consolidating resources. That capital is then routed cleanly through the central Nexus Plus platform. Here, it is sorted, de-risked through capacity building, and assigned to structured portfolios. From there, the capital branches outwards into highly specific, bankable terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems, funding everything from sustainable farming to marine conservation. The ultimate destination of this entire engineered system is sustainable, inclusive regional growth. Trillions of dollars in raw liquidity are meaningless without the pipelines to carry them. Building local institutional capacity, specifically ESG governance and standardized climate risk frameworks, is the true prerequisite for economic survival. Empowering regional DFIs through platforms like Nexus Plus establishes the institutional framework required to secure the future of the Asia-Pacific.